I don't know if you can see it well with my iPhone, but trust me, it's awesome. Hey everybody. Welcome to Knitting My Shit Together, a knitting podcast, yarny podcast, because there's crochet too, where neurodiversity and yarn collide. My name is Farah. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram at Farah Knits. And welcome. If you are new, hi, it's good to have you. If you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad you're back. So I have an interview today that I recorded yesterday that I'm gonna air, and it's an interview / conversation with Mari Howe, also known as Bad Betty Knits on Instagram, who has been part of the size inclusivity conversation going on Instagram. And I'll talk about it more later about why I'm doing it, why I think it's important to interview her and talk about it, but just to be conscious and aware of time and not have this episode be like 3 hours long, but be able to include my full interview with her. I am going to keep other parts of the podcast that are normally a little bit longer a wee bit shorter. And I'll tell you what I leave out when we get there. Also, I've been watching previous episodes, so in case you didn't know from my subtitle, if you're new, where neurodiversity and yarn collide, so I am a neurodivergent person, and with several things, and one of them happens to be ADHD, which is a tidge of hyperactivity. Like the combination type is what they call it. So both impulsivity, which is why I interrupt Mari several times in our interview and I'm trying to work on, and hyperactivity. And I say it to start with, I also have depression and anxiety disorder and PTSD. There's the list of all the letters of the alphabet that are on my permanent record. But, all of that to say, I was watching previous episodes and noticing, like, man, I am physically all over the place, like talking with my hands, moving so much, and I don't even realize it because it's how I exist. And I thought about, do I need to work on that and not do that? And I was talking with my friend Sarah, who I mentioned on last podcast, and she said, no, I kind of like it because it's just you. And it's just how I am. So if I'm fidgety all over the place, like that's just what my brain does. And for me to stop doing that would require an insane level of focus and energy that would make this not super fun to do anymore. And it's just been fun and a joy, and I want it to keep being a fun and a joy. So you're just gonna have to deal with some fidgetiness. Sorry. Okay. If that bothers you. And if it bothers you that much, you can just now watch. Okay. So let's get started. To start, I want to talk about FOs. I have one FO and I am wearing it, and it is my Shaker Rag top. You can see, I love it. So I'm going to try and get in the frame here. I'm wearing it with my favorite maxi dress. You can see some of the striping here. It's better in daylight. You can see a little bit there, which is created by holding the yard single for a number of rows and then double for a number of rows. I love this top. I love how it fits. It came out exactly how I pictured it to come out and fit in my mind. And the credit for that goes to Patty Lyons. So I have decided that Patty Lyons is like my fairy knit mother, is what I've decided, because I either before didn't swatch, or when I did swatch, it wasn't a good swatch, which I learned from Patty Lyons when she was on Christy Glass Knits. And I have started swatching the way she teaches for the past 2 garments I've made, and they both have fit like a dream, which makes me so happy. So there's a link to that video in my mentions playlist on this website if you would like to watch it. So first off, I think it fits me so well and it came out how I hoped, partially because of that, of good swatching to begin with. Also, it's a really great pattern. This pattern is in the Mason-Dixon Field Guide number 7, I believe, or 6. It's the one called Transparency. And it's a great pattern. Like, I highly recommend it. So let me tell you what I did when I knit this. Let me get to my episode show notes. Okay, so I knit this in Holst Garn Coast. Their Coast yarn, which is 55% merino, 45% cotton. This is in the lead colorway. It is a light fingering weight yarn. I used size US 6 needles. I don't know what the millimeters is in that. It'd be easy to find out, but I don't have a thing close by to find out. But so I used US size 6 needles, and that gave me the fabric that I really liked. Ooh, look at the stripes. So here's what I changed. And it's not major, and you're gonna see me, I think in the interview with Mari, I joke and laugh about it because it's so minor, but I'm so terrible at math and like spatial relations. I don't know that even the small amount of like adjustments I made, I'm like, I'm a rock star, but I'm not really. It was so little, but I'll tell you what I did. So this garment is cast on at the bottom and you knit up a certain number of inches, and I did not measure inches. Instead, I did what Patty Lyons recommended, and I went based on my blocked row gauge. So my blocked row gauge was 8 stitches, 8 rows to the inch after it was washed and blocked my swatch. So, quasi-blocked, more just like pinned down and allowed to dry. So what I did was I just knit up the number of rows that made that many inches for my blocked gauge is what I did. Because what I didn't want this to do is come out really too short. I mean, I like a crop top, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm going to be knitting the Tanya coming up, but this one I didn't want to be that way. So, I knit the number of rows to get that inches number, and then you divide it the front and back and knit back and forth. However, the underarm increases are supposed to be a certain measurement in inches as well, and doing the number of rows that the pattern said to do wouldn't give me that much. I would need to do more, like I think I figured it out. I would need to do 2 extra or 3 extra rows to get my blocked row gauge. So I added an extra increase because I didn't want it to go like this and then like flatten for the last couple rows. I wanted it to keep going diagonal. So I knit extra rows at the underarms and did an extra increase. And then that meant that when I got to the neckline, I had to do an extra decrease on the neckline to compensate for that extra increase that I'd added. And it was more rows. It was like 3 extra rows I added or something. I don't know. Nothing super huge. And then I just had to, change that. What else about this? Apparently also, apparently I'm not a tight knitter at all. I'm right in the middle, I think, is where I fall somewhere. But I'm apparently a really tight binder offer because, well, first off, let me say this. When I was putting in the neckline, it says, pick up this many stitches around. It doesn't have to be the exact number, but I think they probably give the number as a guide. So the first time I redid it several times because the first time I was being kind of perfectionist about it, or maybe the second time, and I divided in quarters and put pins and figured out how many stitches should be in each, and and it says it, but I just it didn't work because what happened is, because I'm a tight binder offer apparently, is it actually cinched at the neck. So there was cinching going on, and I really wanted like a loose, relaxed neckline. So then I decided to do this. I ripped it out and I said, you know what? It's a really easy neckline. Like, you pick up the stitches and bind them off. That's it. So I decided to just start over again. And so I think 3 times total I started, and I'm like, I'm just not going to count. I'm just going to pick up however many stitches looks right or feels right to me, and then bind off. And so I did that. And then I bound off using Jenny's super stretchy bind off, since I'm a tight binder offer apparently. And the video for that is also in the mentions playlist, a tutorial on how to do that. And it gave me exactly the neckline I was hoping for. So I'm glad I went with my gut. I did Jenny's super stretchy bind off on the arms too. They're plenty spacious. They're kind of perfect. And I really, really love this top. I have already worn it a couple times since finishing it, and love it. And I know I'll get a lot of use out of it. I would consider knitting another one, and I think it would be fun to try doing another one like non-striped, do the exact same shape except just do single strand as a even lighter one, and see what that looks like. I don't know. I would knit it again. I have a whole bunch of other things I want to knit too, but I would knit it again one day. Yeah. So that, I think, is it. Looking at my notes, that is it for this top. But yeah, I recommend it if you're looking for a really great summer top to knit. This is one. I haven't checked on size inclusivity for this yet because the pattern is on my laptop and I just realized that. So I'm not sure what bust it goes up to. And I'll explain all that later during and after my interview with Mari, and why I don't know, but I always will know in the future. Yeah, so that's that. I think that's it for FOs. So let's move on to whips, works in progress. And this is one part that I am going to cut short because I only have one new whip, and the other ones are things I've showed in previous episodes, and I've made some progress on them for sure, but not enough that I feel like cutting and taking extra time to go over them all. So I am just going to talk about one of my whips, but I have a few. So from my Fringe Supply Town bag, I started the Maritimo sweater by Caitlin Hunter. It's in her Italy series. And I have just started, by the way, this is Firefly Notes, this Acorn Progress Keeper. I just started the second lace section this morning. So here's the deal with this. So this color, this blue, is leftover scraps I had from a shawl I knit as a gift. It might be Madeline Tosh or it might be Malabrigo. I'm not sure, but I had enough of it to work for this pattern, and I thought it went well with the other things. So yeah. And then I was gonna do the Colinette Jitterbug for this lace part, but I even knit it up to like halfway the first repeat in that, and I just was not loving how it looked at all. It almost had too high of a twist, the yarn, and it says it was a sport weight yarn, but it really felt like a fingering weight. It was maybe a light sport fat fingering, I don't know, but I just didn't love how it looked, so I ripped out. And I pulled out of my stash this that I didn't have a use for in my stash. It's an old skein, and what this is, I have the tag here, this is Walk Collection Cozy Merino. It's 100% superwash merino. There are 366 meters in 100 grams, and this is the mica colorway. So there's the tag. I got it at Stephen B. And I'm so glad I switched and ripped back, because it's just kind of been knitting like a dream. I mean, it was so much easier. Now here's the thing with the lace. And the gray, the middle section, which is going to be my main color for the body, this right here is I have the tags. I save them and then throw them after I share them once. Madeline Tosh charcoal in Twist Light is the yarn, which is 75 merino, 25 nylon, fingering weight, 420 yards per skein. And this is color 195 charcoal. And I had that in my stash. I don't know that I would buy more Madeline Tosh, but it was in my stash and I needed to use it. And I am alternating skeins even in this. I started after 4 rows alternating skeins using the helical knitting method, which if you don't know what that is, it's a way to alternate skeins or do stripes without getting that line up the side. So I'll put a link to that in my mentions playlist as well, if you would like to watch that tutorial video. Here's the thing with this. I suck at lace, period. I'm not like blaming everything in my life on ADHD, but I really think it's partially that of why I am so terrible at it. And I think what happened is this. In the directions, Caitlin Hunter says, hey, you can put markers every 17 stitches if you want to mark your lace repeats. And the first time I did it, the first couple times I did, I'm like, no, I don't need that. I'll be fine. It seems like a simple lace pattern because I intentionally don't, like, I can't even fathom knitting a really complex lace giant shawl. Like, I don't ever see myself knitting that. It feels like an exercise in frustration to me. But I do, when there's a little pretty lace section in something else that I like, I'll knit it. So I was being naive, overly optimistic, just plain stubborn, and was like, I don't need to put in stitch markers. And it turns out I do. So I had a day where I ripped out twice maybe on the first day because I couldn't fix my mistakes. I tried to fix them and they just weren't beyond that. And then the second day I got it knit up, but decided to rip out and switch to the new yarn. And I decided to put the new yarn on and transfer it while I was riding the bus and public transit on my way to therapy. Why I thought that was a good idea, I have no idea. Got to therapy, thought everything was going great. Put the knitting down, did therapy. It was a really intense therapy session. So I think I was kind of emotionally exhausted from that, and then proceeded to keep working on the lace on the train and bus home, and then got home and went to go knit another row and realized I totally effed up again. And then I cried and and then I decided I needed to take a brief pause and do some self-care. And so I knit something else that is garter stitch delight and rows in a delightful yarn. I'll show you that one next week. And then later felt better. And I watched stand-up comedy so I could laugh, and then decided, okay, later I can do this, except I am going to use freaking stitch markers and quit being stubborn and just admit that it's an accommodation I need to take and accept reality about how my brain works. So you can see those. And it's been a total success ever since I imagine that. Ever since I put in stitch markers, it's completely working. So yeah, that's it. I'll hopefully finish the lace tonight or tomorrow, and then I'll just be knitting the body up to the underarms and then dividing for front and back again. And I think I have one more lace repeat each, and they're like one on each sleeve, and that's kind of it. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. And I am knitting this US 4s, which is 3.5 millimeters, Maluka needles, and that's it for that. That's my whip I wanted to share this week. Okay, done with that. Now we are going to move on. So if you're a new viewer, I typically do a segment called the Mental Health Moment, where I talk about stigmas, issues, all of that all the things, resources, all the things for neurodivergent folks and neuroatypical folks. You know, yeah, and it's fun and I like doing it. This week is going to be different. I'm putting my interview with Mari in my mental health moment, and I want to start off right off the bat and say a couple things. Thing number one, we're not going to be talking about weight. We're not going to be talking about food. We're not going to be talking about health because it's not that issue. We're going to be talking about social justice and inclusion. First off. Second off, even though I am putting it in my mental health moment segment, that is not because I think that being fat is a mental illness or mental health problem, because I do not. I do think it would be really tiring of constantly seeing beautiful knitwear patterns that I couldn't wear because they weren't designed to include me. That would get really old fast. But I do not think it's a mental health issue. So I just want to make sure you hear that. So then you might ask, okay, so why are we talking about it? Like, why, if you have a podcast focused on yarn, knitting, crocheting, and not much crocheting, a little bit, I'm doing some blankets, but anyway, tangent. Why are we talking about this here? And I'll tell you why. The reason why is because of intersectionality and a whole lot of other things. So first off, there are fat folks who are also neuroatypical and neurodivergent. So there's that. The other reason is that we can't talk about, like in a previous, we've talked about accessibility issues. We've talked about stigmatizing language. We've talked about several of those topics on this podcast. I have, the proverbial we. But anyway, I can't talk about that and not talk about being inclusive in terms of size, because all oppression is linked. That does not mean, and I say this in the interview with Mari too, I do not believe that everyone's experience of oppression is the same and discrimination. That is not true. But I do believe that all oppression is linked. So yeah. So we're going to talk about it because it's important and it needs to be talked about. And if you're watching and you're a person with mental illness or a neurodivergent person, you probably very likely know what it feels like to be discriminated against. And so you should care when it's happening to other people too. And that's that. So, first off, let me say this. This is the first interview I've ever done. So there's that. Keep that in mind when you're watching this. Like, this is episode 7, people. Like, I'm figuring it out and making it up as I go along, but having a ton of fun, which is why I keep doing it. So I say that to say this. I basically did a screen recording. I'm up in a little box here. You'll barely see me. Mari is the main focus. But I'm learning how to interview too. And again, like, I noticed I interrupt her several ideas because impulsiveness, and yeah. And also a funny thing happens where you're going to see. So I take an evening Adderall because when my morning day one has worn off, the extended release, just to get me through the evening, I'll have another one. I set a reminder or I forget to take it. And it's really funny because then in the middle of the interview, you'll see a thing come up that says, bling, take PM Adderall. And I just start laughing and I say something to Mari about it. And because I'm recording the screen, you're going to get to see it too. So now you get to learn about one of the meds I take. So there's that. So my first interview, have grace. I'm still figuring stuff out. I'll probably do it differently the next time I do an interview, but it was an honor and privilege to talk to her. And I'm so grateful and thankful for her time And it really ended up in being more of a conversation than an interview because I suck at shutting up and listening. But it was good. I liked it. I didn't take a lot of notes, and I told her I wanted it to be very organic and back and forth, which you'll hear. So, yeah, have a watch, and I'll be back when the interview is over to kind of summarize, wrap things up about the interview and about the topic of inclusivity. And then I'll do acquisitions and then end the show. So, enjoy the interview. So, hey, Mari.
Hey.
Welcome to Knitting Your Shit Together. Thanks for being here with us today and for joining me.
Yeah.
To prepare for this, I've seen your YouTube channel before. I am a subscriber to your show. I think I subscribed and watched your latest is episode 7, and I watched it a couple weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
But for research for us meeting, I went back and watched episode 1 last night.
Oh, nice.
Okay, my 2 favorite quotes from episode 1 are this. You said, "I'm an introvert and do not generally like to comment on things," was one quote. Your other quote says, "I'm not trying to be the person who comes out and says, 'It's beautiful, I love it, but why aren't you designing it for above a size 12? Like, those were 2 quotes that when you said them on episode 1, I just giggled, and I was like, oh, I'm for sure mentioning that. Oh, and by the way, before we start, I also looked to your Ravelry page, and I saw your favorite curse word, and we are completely curse friendly here. So you can you can say fuck all you want. Okay, I put a warning slide in the beginning. Okay. Okay. So those 2 quotes, I saw you've been knitting for about 12 years. You said. So
yeah, about that.
When was that? I didn't check. When was that first podcast episode? Was it like?
It was the beginning of this year, so just in January. I'd been kind of thinking about doing it for like maybe a year before that because I kind of had. I've been knitting since 2008, and when I, like 2015 for whatever reason, I kind of went on a hiatus because I got a dog. I just wasn't feeling it. I was still knitting occasionally, but not like religiously the way I feel like I do now.
Yeah.
And about a year and a half ago now, I kind of got into it. And one of the things that really did get me back into it, aside from going to yarn shows and seeing all the amazing indie dyed yarn that's now available, was finding out that there were all these podcasts. And so I was like, this is amazing, you know, and everyone, and there's like one for every flavor, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like I love the Grocery Girls, and I love, you know, Dunder Knits and Chevy Rell, and all of them are very, you know, they're all different for me. So even though I like them, I don't think it matters that I don't have a podcast exactly like them. So
exactly.
It's just, I finally kind of got it together and decided to do it. And it's just for fun. Like, I don't know that it's ever meant to be anything more than just me having a way to talk to anybody about my knitting, other than having, like I think you said, I always feel like people will glaze over in about 15 seconds if I talk about knitting, and they're like, cool.
So, given the quotes from that first episode, like, I'm an introvert and don't like to comment on things, and I don't want to be the person who comes out and says, it's beautiful, I love it, but why aren't you designing it for above a size 12? Okay, given the past 3 days, and just, so, can you sum up for you what happened the past 3 days in your experience, how it all unfolded, like the beginning incident, what you said, you know, I'm going to talk about how I came to know about it in a totally different part. I want this to be about you. So you share that story.
So I guess 3 days ago now, I keep thinking of her Instagram name, but forgetting her real name. Isabel Kramer, I guess, released her latest pattern, and apparently it had been a while. I don't follow her religiously or anything, so I wasn't really aware of, you know, whether or not that had been a while, whatever. And, you know, and I went and looked at it, and of course you see the stream of people saying, oh, it's amazing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it was lovely.
Were you aware that she's like a quasi-prolific designer?
I knew that. Okay. Like, I knew that she was I had a lot because I've bought one of her patterns before, even though I've not knitted it. And like, my style tends towards sort of classic pieces.
Yeah.
So like that works really well with my style, but I've never really gone into her stuff because like it tops out at, like I think 48 maybe. And probably not, I mean, that would be with fudging it, where it's like, I can make it work for me, but that's not what she intends for it to be.
And yeah, I was going to say a 48 with about 5 to 10 inches of positive ease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's the plight of the fat girl, and the one that I've dealt with for the most part. I usually can fit into things that they'll design it to be a 53 inch, and I don't mind, and everything's being designed with so much ease now, but I don't wear things with that much ease ever. And so a lot of times I can make things work, and that's pretty much the motto of the fat girl, especially fat girl knitters, which is, you're going to learn to make it work, because if you don't get to knit anything. And I've just never been one to say like, oh, I'm not allowed to do this,
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, the funny thing is I have commented occasionally to relatively popular designers, kind of saying, hey, are you ever going to come out with this in a larger pattern? And like, sometimes they'll reply and say, yeah, I'm thinking about it or whatever. And, I'm probably not going to go much further than that. And it's just really interesting that this has taken off the way it did. I think it's just that with all the discussions about inclusivity, I'm glad that the size inclusivity has waited, because obviously I think a lot of the Black, Indigenous people of color stuff really should have taken precedence. But now that we've already kind of had those conversations, I feel like it kind of was building the tinder of the flame for this discussion about size inclusion, and it just took off.
Yeah, I'm glad things happened in that order as well, but I'll also say what I think this highlights too, though, and what I talked about a little bit before I introduced the video, is how like the interconnectedness of all forms of oppression and how it's all linked, which does not mean that the people experiencing it are experiencing the same thing, because they're not at all. But all oppression is linked, I think.
And that was something that, even though I was happy to share, I'll share my own thoughts all day long, but it didn't take very long for me to kind of get to that point where I was thinking, yes, it's all these like wonderful fat women that are coming out of the woodwork just saying, I'm so glad to see someone being represented, but I still had that kind of itchy feeling in the back of my mind, like, this is all super white ladies, like having this discussion. And that's fine. Obviously, like, I wasn't surprised by it, but I also was trying to think how to bring in, and call out the fact that, that most size inclusivity stuff happens because Black, Indigenous, and women of color, are the ones kind of, it's usually coming from their oppression to start with, and then, we're kind of feeding off it. But yeah, by the time it gets to the white ladies, it feels a little bit more mainstream, and like at some point it's just a little bit like, oh, okay.
I'm so glad that you said this, because this is why when I was preparing for this interview last night, I made this note. And I was like, this might seem really random and tangential. I even circled it in my bullet journal. And I wrote tangent if it comes up. You know what I mean? And now it just did. And so which is, I just took a class. I'm an English major. I'm returning to college because I didn't finish the first time at 18. And I took a textual analysis class, which, okay, and we studied a French literary theorist named Althusser, who talks about subjectivity, which is our ideas, beliefs, and all of that, like what we believe, our opinions about ourselves, others, all of that, and how it's formed by ideology or systems of ideas, and how often those systems of ideas are subconscious. So, we get those ideas through the media, through public school, you know what I mean? All norms are developed that way. And it's because it can be subconscious, it can make it trickier to see. And I think you shared, I don't know who originally posted it, but you shared a screenshot or something on your story that talked about thinness being attached to white supremacy culture. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's a completely Eurocentric ideal is what it is. I mean, completely Eurocentric ideal. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw something maybe last month when this kind of all started about when people were talking about the intersectionality of it. You know, they were talking about how I think around issues of slavery, that's where the ideas around fat became negative instead of signifiers of wealth and prosperity. Because as you were having, I don't know exactly if it was around having slaves freed or enslaved people freed.
Yeah.
That, you know, suddenly people were saying, oh, they're fat and lazy, or they're fat and sloppy, or, you know, as a way to kind of continue the system of demeaningness. You know, versus, you know, probably 50 years before that, if you were fat, I mean, that just meant that you had enough money and you had enough food and things like that. But it was very heavily coded to white or upper class, I guess I'll say. And I think it became more racialized, particularly around Black bodies, you know, and that. And Master Yarnsmith, actually, she links to the book. And if you go into the fat knitting in my Instagram, I think I have a highlight saved about a book that was recommended that talks a lot about Black bodies and how fatness is or the fat phobia is kind of linked to that. So
Okay.
I don't want to say much more about it because I haven't read the book and I don't know much about it. So
I'll put
I
a thing up
like
on the screen right now with a title of that book so that people see it. Yeah. Also, so okay, going back, so you post this thing and you basically take a screenshot of Isabel Kramer's newest design, tag her, put it on your story, and basically say, hey, why isn't this more size inclusive? And you did compliment her. I mean, like, you were, First off, I'm not about respectability politics, so let's just say that. Like, I don't care if you were flat out what some people would say is rude, that I don't, like, just stating the truth. I'm not about that, but, like, I don't think people need to be polite when pointing out that people aren't being inclusive. I just don't. And so, but you were like, look, your designs are lovely. It's a beautiful sweater. I would really love to knit it. And probably so would some other fat folks. Like, hey, how about, you know what I mean? And then how did you know it was blowing up? Because I think we follow a lot of the same people. And so it was like, I saw it and I commented on yours. And then like, I got off Instagram 3 hours later, I get back on and I'm looking at stories and I'm like, holy crap, this has blown up.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing was, so I think I commented on her post directly.
Yeah.
And then she messaged me. And then we kind of had some going back and forth, which was what I screenshotted. And then she responded to me in the comment with what her first initial response was, which was, you know, kind of that initial, like, here we go again. You know, that I have no idea if that was intentional or not. I imagine she might be regretting that a little bit now, but so she responded to that. And here's the thing. I know all of those, you know, if you've got tons of, like, there were names I recognized and they were saying, oh, this is amazing. What a great design, blah, blah, blah. And like, I get it. I get why some of that's invisible to people, you know, that they wouldn't have even had a second thought about telling her it was beautiful and not thinking about whether or not it was inclusive. But so she responded and I was kind of like, I'm not really interested in having this fight in her comments.
Yeah.
Because that means I have to be in her comments, which you know, usually devolves into terrible things. And so, and the other thing is, while I agree with you, I don't think it's required.
That's what I mean. It's not required. Like, I think the anger.
I mean, I definitely think that people. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go.
I think people. I went in there because I wanted to be heard, and also, again, as a fat girl, you kind of just go, well, like, it's kind of that feeling of not wanting to take up space or call attention to yourself. I think that's kind of where it started from. So we had a conversation that went on, and when it got to that point, and she just posted the one comment and didn't post anything else from the follow-up conversation, I basically just said, thanks for responding. I'm going to continue this conversation over in my stories. Anyone that's interested is invited to come over there. Because one of the things that I found with these controversial, whatever you want to call it, situations around confronting people is that you get ganged up on in the comments, and it's usually people saying like, "Oh, you should leave her alone. You know, she's not responsible." Blah 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 blah. That's fine. My stance on many things is everyone is entitled to whatever opinion they may have. You can have it. You can say it. Nobody's required to agree with you, to listen to you, whatever. And so, and I think that's one of those things that I definitely saw with the Black, Indigenous people of color representation issues was a lot of people going into other people's spaces to have their arguments. I didn't want to do that. If we were going to have a discussion about it, I wanted to do it in my own space where I could decide if I was going to engage in it or not. And luckily, it has been overwhelmingly positive. I've had like almost zero trolls or anything coming in. And I really did stay out of her comments because I was like, I'm not going to go over there and fight with people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go over there and justify my existence to people who either are severely inclined not to care or to believe me. And that's fine. Like, I don't necessarily expect I'm going to convince anybody. And I think ultimately one of the reasons that it went the way it did is that there are so many people that don't feel represented and probably would not have felt comfortable jumping into the fray of a popular designer's comments when you've got people saying things like, eat a salad and go for a run. I think that was like one person really harping on things like that, but no one needs to hear that, right? And
okay.
so
which
I got to
you
share
just
my
want to
story.
answer, how do you not know I didn't go on a run?
You can't even go down that road.
I know,
like,
you can't. It just is opening a can of worms, and we won't get into it here, so go on. Go on.
Yeah. But you know, to be able to put it in my stories, you know, I'm only commenting on my experience and what I've felt and, you know, what I would like to see. So I got tons of responses where people were basically saying, you know, I've never felt like this before. I've never felt like I was able to knit a sweater for myself. Like, I've never, you know, been willing to do it or to think that way about my body or whatever. And one of the things that really seriously bummed me out about the few comments that I did get notices of was there were a couple ladies, you know, that went in there and were like, they didn't say this, but like, I'm fat too. And like, I would never expect anyone to do this. Like, she's an artist and this is her art to like do what she wants with. And I'm like, cool. I mean, that's fine. And like, my thing is we all make choices, right? Like, you get to make the choice about how you feel about that and how you want to respond to it. And that is not how I would choose to do it, but more power to you. But it just made me really sad for them that they just felt like they deserve. It just sounded like they felt that they deserved to not be able to knit things for themselves. And that seems so counter to the whole point of craft, you know, that's why a lot of us get into it, because we want to be able to make things for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I've always been relatively lucky. Like, when I started knitting, the high end was like 48-inch bust. And at that time, that was kind of my size. So I could fit into things that were on the very tail end. And then it kind of expanded as my body expanded. And, you know, now I feel like you see a lot of patterns that go up to a 53 and I'm a 54. So like, I can still make a lot of things work, but I'm certainly not the tail end of the fat spectrum. And so, you know, that sucks for anyone beyond that,
yeah.
You know, you're just out of luck unless you happen to find someone who designed a sweater with like 30 inches of ease.
Yeah.
Or some, you know, something like that.
Yeah, I stopped by, I live 5 blocks from Stephen B's shop in Minneapolis, which is both a gift and can be really horrible on the budget every now and then. But I stopped in this morning to pick up the issue of Lane or Lina and Pom Pom, and me and a couple of the people who work here were talking about this. And one of the things, so here's my question. I saw something, so I began unfollowing people and stuff like that, certain designers. What's funny is I have been a huge Isabel Kramer fan, and I'm just going to admit, like, I've never looked at it. And I'm like, and it was funny because when I realized that, so what happened is I woke up, got on Instagram, saw she had a new pattern out. I'm like, yes, favorite it, buy it, like that. I'm like, I'm so knitting this. And then I go get on Instagram and see her thing, and I'm like, oh, And what I just kept telling myself all day so then I began to like purge my favorites just to like, because it can't be just words for me. I would like it. I try hard for it to be actions and like lived out in my daily life, my beliefs. And so I began on getting rid of patterns that didn't go up to a 60-inch bust. And what I did was, if the pattern is meant to be worn with positive ease, then it needs to go to at least a 60-inch. If it's not meant to be worn with positive ease and it went to like 58, I would be like, maybe. I don't know. Not ideal, but yeah. So, but just that, when I started really looking through, I'm like, holy cow, none of these patterns, like there were some that just had size medium and small.
Yeah.
And first off, I'm like, what does that even mean? A, like that is not a measurement. B, like that tells me nothing. C, there were a whole bunch of patterns that didn't even have any sizes listed, like the metrics of it. But more than that, it was very demoralizing for me to see that, and very eye-opening. And very much like, holy shit, like this is the definition of privilege right here. The fact that I've never noticed, because I've never had to. Like, I've never had to look through a pattern and be like, do you think they offer this in a size that I can knit up?
Yeah.
So it's like the definition of privilege happening right in my house, and I'm like, gotta change this. Which leads me to, I didn't see, so has she formally apologized or owned it?
Again, I have not been back in her comments. I've seen a couple places where she's responded to people basically saying, I think at one point she said something to the effect of, to be fair, I think it had something to do with sort of my dismissive and hurtful tone or something like that. Because they were kind of saying, like, why is everyone getting so up in arms about this, blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, here's the thing.
It's not just her. I mean, that's the thing, too.
It's not just her, but the other thing is, for me, like, I don't need an apology. Yeah. Like, I don't personally need one. Like, it doesn't... I think partially because we had a relatively civil discussion, and, like, I guess I'm not, I don't know. I'm either immune to it, and like, the one thing that thing where she said, here we go again, and I was like, that probably didn't need to come out that way, but people make poor choices lots of times, so, and I'm like, I get, like, all those things, all of her excuses could be legitimate. Like, maybe she's on the very edge of a mental breakdown or a burnout or whatever. I mean, it matters and it doesn't matter. Like, if that's going to be what it takes for her to make a change, like, she needs some time, then she's going to have to take it. Because it doesn't make any sense for me to be like, you need to do it right now, if she's just like, I have no bandwidth for it. Like, from a mental health perspective, like, I get that. But I agree with what everybody else kind of came back with, which is you can hire people to do this. And particularly for someone like her, that probably does make income on patterns versus people that are doing it either out of, a love for the designing or they make very small return on their time. If they're doing it and she's making a full-time job out of it, she doesn't really have an excuse. But ultimately, I guess the bottom line for me is I'm not really offended by it, just because I'm not surprised. Like, I'm not surprised by her attitude. I'm not surprised by her response. She wasn't a bitch about it, she wasn't even particularly defensive. Like, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's just not bothering me. The thing that has been really interesting to me, and, again, about the whole, like, me being able to have a pretty, like, I feel like I got to say what I wanted to, and I did spend time, like, thinking through how to say it, because I didn't want to go in with guns blazing and have that be the reason she might not hear it. But I am also fully in support of everyone who came after, who was angry, and who did use that as a platform to express their anger. Because I do think and agree with all the things that Jessie May and Jacqueline Cieslak and Master Yarnsmith and everybody else that's talking about this stuff. I agree with all their anger as well. And so in some ways, I'm glad that, like, I avoid confrontation because I don't enjoy it. But so I'm glad to be able to share it and not necessarily have to like come out guns blazing myself. So I feel like I've kind of gotten all the best worlds. Like I get to watch everybody else be angry and be like, cool, yes, let's all be angry about it. And but I didn't have to like burn the bridge first, I guess. So I don't know. I don't know what it is that made it so I could just kind of be calm about it.
I guess two things I want to touch on. Number one is, well, there's so many things to touch on in this issue and we don't have all night, but this is what I'll say. Is one thing is I'm including a link to a YouTube video that I'm attaching to this on how to apologize when you get called out, because you cannot just leave the word "but" out. Like, just, you know what I mean? Like, there's an appropriate way to take ownership that doesn't require people feeling like they need to tend to your wounded ego. Like, to me, that's not an apology. You know, it's just owning, like, okay, I fucked up. Like, I was wrong. I am going to do better. I am going to fix this, you know? And there are designers who've come out since, who've totally done that, who've been like, hey, even designers like, okay, if I'm not mistaken, like Andrea Mowry, some of her more recent designs have been inclusive.
Yeah.
But she came out and apologized for all the previous designs that weren't, and then said, hey, I'm going to be updating them. I'm in the process of starting that, you know? Yeah.
I totally get that. I mean, in life, I feel like that, I'm trying to think what to say. I'm not being very eloquent about it. I feel like intent cures like 99% of all wrongs as long as you follow it through. That, I don't know that that's really the right way. You can cut all this rambling out if you need to.
I don't edit.
But basically,
just so you know.
I think of this way. Like, I think 100%, like, I get that first glance, most people will have a defensive reaction. That's basically everything I've seen is basically said when you are in a significant position of privilege, it's not uncommon or even unreasonable for your first reaction.
Yes, of course.
Mentally to be defensiveness. I think the thing is, like, a lot of people probably don't sit on things long enough to think through, like, is that really a good idea for me to, like, that to be the first thing? They don't sit with it long enough. They feel like I'm being attacked versus someone's attempting to help me, I guess. But I think the difference is, like, if you're going to stick to your guns about, you know, what you're defensive about, you're going to be in the hole for a long time versus, like, if someone came to me and said, you know, you did this wrong, you should have handled it X, Y, Z. Now, we may not agree on that, but if they said to me, you know, you hurt me, you know, I'm learning too, like, that it doesn't matter if I think I hurt them or not. Like, if they've told me I hurt them, then I've hurt them. Like, there's no, I think Gigi made it said that very well. Like, someone tells you that you hurt them, like, you have to listen to them.
Yeah.
Because you can't disregard their feelings. And so I think that is a pretty significant indicator of if someone's gonna, you know, like, you can fuck up an apology, but, like, if you get it in the long run, or you can do things wrong and still come back and apologize. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that's unfortunate. Like, I hope people don't feel like they can't, like, everybody's got to be so perfect at first glance. Like, I mean, I feel that way too, but, you know, I think we need to be better about being okay with people fucking up, you know? Like, if she comes back, I mean, like, Karen Templer is a great example, I think. Because, you know,
I'm recording my screen. Sorry, I just smiled because I'm recording my screen, and this will all be in it. And a little bell went off, and a thing went up that says "Take PM Adderall." And so I'm just like, yeah. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, like,
go on.
I think, you know, like Karen Temp, the thing that kicked off all the inclusivity stuff. You know, I think she's been a good example because, you know, even when people were coming to defend her once she got it, she was saying no. Like, I fucked up, you know, and I'm sorry, and here's this and that. And so she was a really good example of, like, you can fuck it up, but, like, as long as you get it in the long run and make amends, like, that's the most important part. Like, you're going to get past it in the long run if you can at least acknowledge that you've done wrong and make amends versus, like, someone that just is unwilling to realize that, like, they're a flawed human being. Like, I guess my own personal philosophy is, like, I fully expect that I will fuck up, you know? Like,
yeah.
I mean, we're all human. That's the whole point, right? That we're all going to mess up at some point. And so, I mean, it's better to just be able to say, oh yeah, that sucks. I totally screwed up. I'm sorry about that. Than to just buckle down and be like, no, I'm right. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. So I think what's also interesting, and I think I want to be sure people hear, and I'm sure you do too. I mean, I won't assume what you think, but is the whole idea that the sizes you're asking for designers to design up to, like of at least a 60-inch bust, is not a crazy demand at all. I mean, who was it? Somebody put on Instagram today, and I told them I'm going to look it up because I told them I would, cite them. Somebody put in a thing about, they showed a piece of work that was at MoMA, I believe, and it's a mannequin, that indigo dragonfly, and it was a piece that it was at MoMA, and it's of a mannequin surrounded with a tape measure that's like the average size, statistically, the average size body in the United States. And I can't remember what it was said about those measurements, but when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I mean, I knew it before. I didn't think 60 inches before was ridiculous. I'm like, whatever size human bodies are, we need to be making all the clothes for. You know what I mean? Like, that's all there is to it. And I think what's interesting is I've believed that. Like, I never didn't believe that. But it took, sadly and horribly, and my bad, mea culpa, it took all this for me to really look at the patterns I was favoriting and liking and being like, oh,
yeah.
Okay, but yeah, 60-inch bust is not a crazy expectation at all for people who think it might be. Yeah.
I was telling someone, if you're the person I was talking to, I'm sorry, I don't remember names anymore. I was telling someone about an experience I had when I had to go buy a suit for an interview on relatively short notice. Like, I had to go to a department store to buy it, and I had a girlfriend that was like, "I'll come with you. It'll be fun. We're gonna like go look." And I was like, this is not going to be fun. And she was like, why not? And I was like, oh
my gosh.
So just so you know, like, all of the plus size sections are either tucked in a corner or in a basement. It's usually terribly organized. The clothes either look like stacks or bags of cotton candy, and your options are just excruciatingly limited. And she was like, no, it'll be fine. We're going to go get you a suit. And we went to like 2 or 3 department stores. And by the end of the day, she looked completely shell-shocked. She was just like, I can't believe how difficult that was. And that you don't have any options.
And I was like, welcome to...
Again, like, I was resigned to it before we even went. I didn't have any expectation that it was going to go any different. But I think it's that, like, if you don't have that experience of having to go do that stuff, if you never had to look for a pattern to find, like you were saying, like, if you never had to look for a pattern to see if it went up to your size, then it doesn't even occur to you that, like, you should, and I think the other thing that always kills me is when I meet people in real life and they talk about, like, how many stitches they have on the body for a sweater or something. They're like, I had, like, 300 stitches, and I'm like, or 200 or whatever, and I'm like, bitch, I got so many more. Like, I heard someone was talking once about knitting a boxy in worsted weight and having like 400 stitches, and I was like, that is every single time I want to knit a garment, and more. Like, and it's just one of those things that the person that was probably like a size 6 or something, like, it just blew their mind that they were going to have to knit 400 stitches, and I was just like, you've got to be more aware of this. Like, I don't know why I care that they're more aware of it, but it's like, I think it's just because it irritates me. It's like,
because they're acting like it's this huge laborious thing. That, I think, is that why it, like, that's why it would.
I think so. And they just act like it's the most outrageous thing in the world and they can't imagine it. And I'm just like, it just shows how unaware people are. And I mean, you can only do so much, if someone's not already inclined to care or be open-minded to that. Like, I've had people just, like, I've said something and people have been like, oh, and then, like, walked away, and I'm like, yeah, I guess you just don't care, like, whatever. But, I mean, and when people, want test knitters, like, I think it's great that they're, that Test Knits is out there to offer people an opportunity, but I've now test knit 2 garments, and I met the deadline on one by making the sweater a cropped sweater, and the other I'm still not finished with, and it was due in, like, November. and it's not that they didn't give reasonable deadlines, but I guess they kind of weren't, like, for the sizes. And I just saw someone post something, and they were like, it's got a month turnaround. And I was like, you're going to be lucky if anyone can get any of that to you. Like, a month is, like, head down doing it until from sun up till sundown at your most extended sizes.
And I think this plays into what you were saying earlier about the people on Isabel's thread who are like, she's an artist, we don't expect that. This, I feel like, dovetails onto that by saying, okay, designers, I know you're in a hurry to get your pattern out, but here's the deal. All of the knitting community is worth it. And, like, I'll just say this, it's worth it for me to wait for a pattern to come out, for it to be inclusive, and anybody be able to knit it. Like, I'll wait extra. Okay, you have to charge a little bit more. Like, I'm in a place, and a lot of other knitters are, to be able to afford that. And if not, do the sliding fee so that folks who aren't, you know what I mean, it can be accessible. Financially, size inclusive, all of those things. Like, I think waiting is telling fat people, like, you are worth designing for. I'm going to do it right because you are a knitter. You are part of my people. You know what I mean?
And I think it'll be very I don't know that this will happen. And I've just had that thought where people have said, sometimes when people say, I will pay more for it, like, I'm fine. And I know there have been discussions about paying more for patterns in general. I think this is apart from that. But, when you're fat, you usually tend to pay more for clothes, or you pay more for the same clothes that are lesser quality or whatever. And so with patterns, I'm a little concerned that some of the bigger designers will take this call that, like, they need to go educate themselves again and basically pass the expense of it off to their new expanded sizes, when I think that, it's just a part of doing business. And I have no idea if that will happen. I'm curious to see if it ever does with anybody. Well, because I feel like, if you're a straight size and suddenly you've got to pay $9 instead of $7 so that everybody gets to knit it, unaware people are going to be like, why did this suddenly go up? And maybe unwilling to pay that. And they would be the ones that might think, well, make the fat people pay for it. But I feel like if you're okay with that, then I feel like that shows that you're just not really interested in helping fat knitters, like.
Yeah, that's a valid
I'll give you my
point.
money and I'll pay you more for it. But I mean, I don't think there's any reason why I should have to pay more because, you're grading. I haven't graded anything, so I don't have experience with it. But, either you're paying someone to do it for you or you're doing a little bit more math in a spreadsheet. I just don't know that it would be fair to see any tiers of pricing based on size. So
that's true.
That's what I'm curious about. I think sometimes I think, like, sewing patterns might do that, especially if you've got a printed one that they're printing the pattern, maybe they do that, but I don't know. That just seems unnecessary to me.
The whole point is that it should have been, everybody should have been designed for from the beginning. Like, since Ravelry came online, designers should have been designing patterns for every size of human body. And so that's why it was interesting when you said, when I read your quote, when I came across that quote from your first episode last night, where it said, I'm not trying to be the person who comes out and says, it's beautiful, I love it, but why aren't you designing it for above a size 12? I wrote beneath that because you said, I'm not trying to be the person who. I wrote below it, we all need to be.
Yeah.
Like, we can't put the labor of doing this on 5 people. Like, everybody, and I've seen several people posting today who culled their cues like I did and their favorites and are now messaging designers. And I'll start keeping my eye on new patterns that catch my eye. When they come out, I'll look. And if it isn't inclusive, I'll message the designer and say, hey, I was going to buy your pattern, but I didn't because you did not write it for everybody. So, yeah. I'm just saying that, not to be like, I'm just saying that because I want to share ideas on here for people of what they can do to contribute. You know what I mean? I liked the whole thin trader hashtag that went out. I thought that was good. So, yeah.
the funny thing about the unfavoriting stuff, like I haven't gone through and done it myself, and I probably will to some degree, but I think it's fantastic that that is something that then people can do to support us. And I've seen some people that have been like, wow, that's really depressing, the number of patterns that are left once I do that. And here's the thing. I don't know, again, if it's sort of a sign of oppression, but there's part of me that's like, you know, if someone designs up to a 53 that I can work with, you know, like I think it's a different mindset because we're already dealing with scarcity as plus size women, you know, trying to find things that will fit us. And I have such an ingrained attitude of like, make do, you know, make it work or make something make do, that in some ways it's almost a luxury for y'all to be able to say like, I'm not going to do this, because you'll still always be able to fit in some of those. And like, there's some that like, I think I would see my role more as to continue doing that, where I say, hey, could you consider being inclusive? I'm coming at this from someone who would like to give you my money, you know, and being able to raise that alarm. But yeah, I mean, I don't buy that many patterns unless I know I'm going to knit them. So I think that helps too. But yeah, I think it will be interesting to see if a lot of those designers see a significant impact from people in favoriting. But yeah, time will tell.
I hope this gains momentum.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I hope it all does. And like the change snowballs, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's happening. I mean, I feel like people are open to hearing it. I mean, it's definitely something. I'll say this, as far as the knitting community goes and designers, size inclusivity is probably something that people feel like is a more concrete thing that they can both wrap their minds around and respond to, you know, versus the injustice that a lot of Black, Indigenous people of color, dyers, pattern designers face. You know, I mean, and I think obviously you can raise them up as well, but, you know, with some of the racial stuff, there's systems that like it's really hard to overcome, versus this, if it's a matter of saying like, I need to find a tech editor who can help me grade. I mean, that's a little bit easier for an individual to kind of say, here's how I can contribute to this. Now, obviously, because of intersectionality, that will help some people. And I hope that people come out of the woodwork and say like, and show where the intersections are coming in. But I feel like it's been improving since I started knitting, 11 years ago. Like I said, when I started, 48 was a pretty standard pattern size to find in even an independently designed pattern. And now a lot of popular patterns go up to a 53. I don't see patterns that are, that you see constantly on Instagram coming up that are knit or, are size below a 53, because I think they've at least realized that. And I think this is the next step to say like, okay, now you've got to be able to cover the entire range that the Craft Yarn Council has given you, and so it's all steps. And I think we're heading in that direction. And I agree. I hope the momentum continues. And now it's going to be a matter of finding tech editors and people that can help. Because if I was in that boat, I would love to pay someone to do that, because I, wouldn't have that expertise.
But even like watching your podcast, hearing about all the modifications you've made to patterns. Well, I mean, I shared with you before we started recording, like I do suck at math, but also I'm like, wow, Mari already knows so much more about design and garment build because of having to do this than I have. Like, I did like slight modifications to my shaker egg top because of gauge, and I felt like really proud of myself. Like I added 3 rows to increase something. I'm gonna talk about it in my works in progress, and I was all like just feeling so self-congratulatory about it. And then I watched yours and I'm like, I don't do shit. Like, I don't alter anything.
I mean, and that's the thing that always surprises me when people are like, oh, well, you just have to alter it. And I'm like, and I had one person comment in particular about how they were especially short. And so they had to add inches to the body and sleeves. And my response was basically like, cool, me too. I'm tall, so I have to add length to everything. Plus, you know, if the pattern's not inclusive, I have to add between 4 and 8 inches of, now honestly, most of the time, if that's the case, I don't knit something, but you know, if I wanted to do that level of adjusting, like I would have to add 4 to 8 inches to the bust, waist, and hips. And even though have been knitting for a good while, like I'm still relatively new to garment knitting and getting them to fit right, and I'm still learning how to do a lot of that stuff. But yeah, like even I knit the Chuck sweater by Andy Satterland a couple months ago toward the beginning of the year, and her pattern goes up to a fit size 53. So I was like, perfect, this is great. And then I realized like her gauge is really loose and is not what I would want. And so I had to basically go through and do all the math to like regrade the entire thing and like add in and.
Which it's like at that point, like why aren't you just? Somebody commented on Instagram, and I'm not sure, I'm forgetting names of people, but like the whole thing of like, at what point do I just design a whole new pattern myself? Yeah. Like, at what point is it not worth it to buy your pattern anymore because I have to change so much, and I might as well design a new pattern and like sell it, you know? Like,
Well, and that's the thing that's interesting to me, particularly with some of these brand names. And like I saw someone comment, must have listed me. I think like Church Mouse is coming out with a group of patterns that are pretty, you know, basic. And I know sometimes like Quince & Co. will come out with patterns. So like yarn brands are coming out with them, and they're really like not inclusive a lot of the times. Like at tops, you're looking at 50 inches, and they're just doing it they're doing it to sell yarn, but they're also a lot of times marketing them as very classic things. And so if it's classic, great, but like, I don't know why I would pay you $10 to teach, you know, if I could find a different pattern on how to knit like a pretty cut and dried V-neck. Like, if I can tell that you did an I-cord bind off on it, and that's the only thing that makes it look different from this rib neckline, you know, at that point, it's not going to be worth it to buy it if you can either figure it out yourself or you have a book that teaches you basic shapes. Like, that's the thing that always surprises me a little about how I get why they're popular because they are classic, but to see people come out and talk about Isabella's sweater, which was very nice, but be like, oh, this is amazing. I was like, it's kind of just a big baggy V-neck sweater. Like, it didn't seem like rocket science.
I own it, so, you know, I bought it before.
I mean, I would have, if it had fit me, I probably would have bought it too, but it was just.
But I'm not going to knit it
until, look at it.
Yeah, until it's
when you stop and look at it, you're like, it's a V-neck sweater with maybe a couple little style details.
It is,
and I mean, it would just take looking at some photos of it to probably figure out, you know, okay, I could do this, you know, probably wouldn't look the same, but you'd be close enough.
No, but you're right. They are very, I mean, yeah. I agreed. Is there anything you want to add and say that I haven't asked you about or talked to you about that you want to make sure people watching this hear?
I'm just really glad to see all the additional support that's come out from graders and dyers and technical editors that have basically said, you know, either we can help, or dyers in particular just recognizing like there's so much emphasis on indie dyed yarn, and we all love it, right? Because it's beautiful. Like, I love it. It's probably a good thing in some ways that I can't always find quantities in my size because I would be broke. But, you know, like I commented in my stories about, you know, sometimes you buy less than you need with that mental part of like, I'm going to have to figure out a way to make this work, either by finding the right pattern or adding some different yarn or something. So the fact that some dyers are coming out and both offering quantity discounts is fantastic, but also they're trying to think about, you know, how can they increase their ability to dye more, to dye bigger dye lots, things like that. And I think the other thing I'd really like to do, I know that Master Yarnsmith is collecting information kind of on like how much yarn does it take you to knit a sweater in, you know, fingering sport, DK, whatever. Because one thing that I thought about in terms of like, I wonder if then people understand this is like the cost of a sweater
is more, yeah.
You know, because I mean, I usually expect an affordable sweater is going to cost at least $80 for me. And you know, if you're a size medium, we'll say, and you know your yarn is half that cost, and it's only 2 skeins or something, like I want to know if I can raise awareness of that by kind of calling out like, here's the economic impact. You know.
Yeah.
It's not just that we don't have access to these things, but when we do, we either have to spend a significant amount more money in order to get the kind of yarn we want, or we have to go to budget options, which some people have to do anyways. But, you know, if you're looking for something, you just may not be able to knit the thing you want for various reasons.
Yeah. Well, like, I'm going to be knitting the Tanya, the next garment I do after the one Caitlin Hunter one I'm doing now. I'm doing the Tanya. 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn will get me there. You know what I mean? Now, I did buy a 3rd skein because I'm becoming a prolific swatcher, but I've like become obsessed with gauge swatches. But yeah, 2 skeins of yarn. And I was even thinking about this last night where I'm like, yeah, here's where you fucked up in this, Farrah. Is like, I said in an earlier podcast when I was talking about that, when I got the first yarn, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make Tanya. I'm like, woo, you can do a sweater with 2 skeins of yarn.
Yeah.
And then I even said in my podcast, I think I said in the moment, or you can in my size.
Yeah.
But looking back and thinking, I'm like, yeah, not good.
Well, like the Soldotna being popular right now, like everyone is coming out and being like, it's so quick to knit, and I'm like, is it? Or is it on you?
And how many stitches were on your needle?
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess it's basically the same thing, but, you know, and, like, sometimes I'll go, if I find yarn I like, I'll buy, you know, 3 skeins of it, and I'm like, I'm either going to make an enormous shawl or, like, a really small sweater. And I did a test knit with something that, like, I had 3 skeins, and I figured out a way to add another color in, and it looks great. Like, I'm happy with how it's come out, but it's one of those things where I was like, I bought that yarn knowing that was not nearly enough yarn for a sweater I was probably going to wear, and I was going to have to come up with some creative method to stretch it. So, I mean, I think to some degree when you've been fat your entire life, it's so ingrained in how you have to like make do, you know, and so I don't think that's ever going to go away. But I'm certainly not going to suggest to anyone that they not try to make it better for us, you know.
I mean, I totally realize that this is just angry, straight-sized, middle-class white lady rage, and that's where this about is, like, seeing this in a way I haven't before, so I get that this comes from complete and utter naivety, but the anger I was feeling, I feel like, it's like, nobody should have to be doing this, like, Mari should not have to have gotten used to this. Mari should not expect people to be assholes on Ravelry or Instagram. Like, she shouldn't have to anticipate entering a civil discussion because of people being jerks. Like, this just shouldn't be this way. But, Someone once told me, wish in one hand, shit in the other, and see which fills up faster. Like,
well, I'll say this: I'll take the straight sized middle class white lady rage over inclusivity over the super thin white lady coming to the defense of designers. Like, don't bother her. This is her choice. It's a free country. Like, I mean, I didn't obviously stick around for much of that, but someone was telling me about it, and I was like, yes.
I like how it's a free country always gets brought into it, because I always feel like going, no, it's not. It is not a free country. It is a free country for, like, 2 people.
Like,
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always, I mean, I truly think that's becoming a life motto, is just like, look, everyone's entitled to make a choice, whatever way they want. They have a right to choose. They do not have a right to be free from consequence.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, if you get pissed off because people get mad, I mean, that's the outcome, that's the effect of what you choose. You know, if people are pissed that I'm calling attention to it, then, like, they get to be angry too. And then my next choice is to block them. You know, to say, I'm not interested in listening to your anger about whatever, you know, and and I mean, sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, but I mean, I don't have much patience for people saying, like, free speech and they deserve to do whatever, and I'm like, well, I mean, they can make that choice, but that doesn't mean they're gonna get away from consequences of it.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to add?
Don't think so.
I'm really grateful for you taking time out to talk to me. Like, I'm
my
really,
pleasure.
really
I was happy
grateful.
to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna stay on so I can wrap up with you, but I'm going to end the recording. Okay, hold on.
Okay, sounds good.
Hi. I finished recording, but I forgot to mention this. And I told Mari I would, so I wanted to do a little blip and add it in. Her website, www.badbettyknits. I'm releasing this on Sunday, but as of Monday, she is going to have her site ready, and she is going to be selling, and I'm totally going and buying some, and so should all of you. She laughed, later we were talking, and she said, I laughed when you mentioned that you've become a prolific swatcher. She is releasing swatch note cards and is going to start selling them so that they're all written out, where you have a space to put in, like, what's the name of your project, what gauge are you getting, blocked, unblocked, all of that. And it sounds really exciting. So go to her website, buy some note cards, www.badbettyknits.com. Okay. Hey, I'm back. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And just to wrap up, this is what I'm doing, and you all get to decide what, if anything, you want to do. I went through my queue and my favorites, and I took anything out that was not size inclusive. If there were designers who, as a rule, generally aren't size inclusive in anything, I unfavorited them. If there's a designer who not all their patterns are size inclusive, but they've publicly said it is something they are working on and have been re-releasing stuff to be more size inclusive, I will still follow them. And that, hence my explanation about the shaker rag top. I know inclusivity is something Amy Christophers cares about, however. It is something she has voiced. So, and I think some of her newer ones have been inclusive sizes, I believe. Sorry, Amy, I didn't look, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so all of it to say, I am not going to knit anything else that is not size inclusive. So I've instead been favoriting and adding to my queue patterns that are. And when I say inclusive, I want it to go up. For me, that means a minimum 60-inch bust, that it would fit someone with a 60-inch bust, including ease. So if I see a pattern that goes up to 59 inches, but then it's meant to be worn, like this is meant to be worn with positive ease, that's part of its look. If it's designed that way and doesn't include that ease to fit a 60-inch bust, I'm just not going to knit it or favorite it. If it has no ease or negative ease and goes up to 59, 60, I'm cool with it. It passes criteria. So that's one thing I'm doing. But to me, that still isn't enough. So normally I'll look at the new top 20 patterns every day, and I will favorite patterns that go into my favorites. And then from there, I buy yarn for patterns from my favorites and then put them in my queue when I have the yarn to knit, and I knit for my queue. So now what I've committed to doing is that when I see a pattern that I love and would typically knit and buy the pattern, but is not inclusive, I am going to message the designer, and I did it for the first time today. I'm not going to say the designer's name or what the pattern was on here because, yeah, they did respond asking me for resources on how to do that. And I'm like, yeah, that's not my job. All of it to say, I will begin communicating to designers and saying, hey, guess what? This is a gorgeous, beautiful pattern and I love it. And I would love to buy it and knit it and wear it around and talk about it on social media. But I can't because you did not make it size inclusive, and I'm not knitting stuff that isn't size inclusive. Somebody, and I talk about this with Mari, you might have seen somebody, I can't remember who, maybe Jacqueline Cieslak, I can't remember, used the hashtag thin trader, which I kind of love. And if designers weren't just hearing from Fat Folks, but from everybody who knits, and saying, I'm not getting this because it's not inclusive, even though I could fit into one of the sizes you do offer. I think that would be a powerful statement, is what I'm saying. You all do what you want to do. You do you. So I'm going to say that. Also, I'm going to say, based on Mari's experiences, and I've said this before in a previous podcast, but just so you know, I will totally be moderating my comments when they go up. I get notified when comments go up on my YouTube, and if someone is being cruel, I'm just going to delete it. I am. So just know that. Like, I'm not going to stand for hate in the comments on my social media. I'm just not. So that's that. Okay. Moving on to acquisitions. I had a few acquisitions this week. I have one I forgot to talk about from last week, and I'm so sorry to this person for not talking about it. So I'm going to talk about it this week. Acquisition basket. Okay. So I needed a new Notions bag because I just have more and I needed room to put them in, and the pouch I had wasn't big enough. And I saw this on Etsy. How adorable. The person who designed it lives in the Netherlands. I can't remember their name, but I know their brand name because of the adorable tag. It is from Lowland Originals, and look at that cute pinstriped fabric with the like dandelion fabric. I'll of course put a link to their Etsy shop right here. And just so you know, what I loved about this is it's an envelope bag, so it doesn't have a zipper. So it comes like this, like a sandwich bag from the 80s. And you flip over the edge when you want to open it. And this is what I like about it. I can leave it sitting open by where I'm knitting while I'm traveling, like a little bag. And it's like a little bowl that I can use, a to-go bowl for my Notions. So I really, really loved it. And I've been really happy with it. And I have plenty of room for more stuff, as you can see. And yeah, so check that out when you're looking for a new Notions pouch. And I believe they make pattern or bags as well, like project bags with this design, which I think is pretty cool. So Lowland Originals, check it out. All right. The other thing I got, well, I have a few things. So I got 2 skeins of Knit Picks, their Felici Bear. And I think how many yards? There's 436 yards and 100 grams. It's fingering weight, 75 superwash merino, 25% nylon at knitpicks.com, because I want to explore dyeing with food coloring myself. Now, let me just go on the record as saying this. I realize that virtually every podcaster becomes a dyer or a designer, and I have no intention of doing either. I do have another idea, but I'm going to be sharing that next week, but it has nothing to do with designing or dyeing yarn. Just want to say that. I would so much rather other people dye beautiful yarn and other people design beautiful patterns, and I buy them and knit them and make it. But I just want to try it and experiment with food color. And so what I was thinking is, so that I can try lots of different things, I think one of these I'm going to break into 100 or 10 gram minis. And the other one I might keep the same, and whichever of the minis I liked the most, I might do this, a whole skein in. And so then I'll have a set of minis and I'll have this. But if I'm really having fun with the minis and I want to keep doing it, I'll just knit more minis. So got those. Next thing. You have seen this yarn before. This is Muse 2320 Fiber Company in Hastings, Minnesota, my hometown. I live in Minneapolis now, but I grew up in Hastings. And this is the Crane Wife base, which is 100% superwash merino, fingering weight. And this is the colorway Matcha Latte that I love. 100 grams, has 437 yards, 400 meters. I am knitting my Tanya out of this, and for the size I'm knitting, I only needed 2 skeins of this, but it would have left me with like, I do not love yarn chicken. I'm not a fan of it. It freaking stresses me out. My anxiety levels just start going up, and I don't want my knitting to be that. And because I'm now a fan of awesome gauge swatching, I didn't want to have to limit my gauge swatch because I didn't have enough yarn. So I got an extra skein. So I called Sarah, who owns Muse 2320, or messaged her and asked if I could buy an extra skein. And she mailed it to me along with a replacement crochet hook for my Luca hook that I lost. Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, so I'm planning on knitting Tanya when I finish Maritimo. So once I get further along, I will, and I'm close to the end, I will start swatching this. So remember how I began knitting my Hermione's Everyday Socks out of Forest Fiber Arts 4-ply sock and was loving it? I was like, I want another pair of socks out of this. So this is Forest Fiber Arts Avocado colorway in their 4-ply sock base, 463 yards and 100 grams. It is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It is beautiful. I might take the label off this one because it's tonal and it's like so pretty but subtle, and I want you to be able to see all the tonal goodness. I don't know if you can see it well with my iPhone, but trust me, it's awesome. So these are going to be, so I am part of Helen Stewart's Handmade Sock Society season 2, and remember I knitted the Shell Cottage socks, I believe, that I gave to my friend. This yarn is going to be used for the second pattern in the club, which is called Samphire, I believe. And the project picture is green, and I really liked it. And so I wanted to get a green as well. So I reached out to Nikki of Forest Fiber Arts and bought this. Okay. My last 2 things are kind of treat yourself things. Well, you know, I've been saying I wanted a shawl cuff because I suck at arranging shawls. So Caitlin Hunter, I follow her on Instagram, Boyland Knitworks, and she shared the link of a friend who also, I believe, lives in Montana and is a maker. And her friend's username, their handle is @jamknit, I believe. And I'll put it here, whatever it is. And I think they're in the process of setting up a website, but don't have it yet. But they use upcycled leather to make all these fabulous shawl cuffs. And they put just numbered them and put a picture of a whole bunch on their Instagram feed and said, hey, DM me with, if you want one of these, this is how much they are, with, how you want, or payment info or whatever, your shipping or out, So basically I messaged them and said, hey, can I get that one with gold hardware? They were like, yes. And we set up the PayPal thing, and yeah, I got my shawl cup and I love it. I think I'm going to get another black one eventually, but for now, having a brown and black one would be good. But for now I just have this, and I've already worn it multiple times and love it. So it's very pretty. Okay. Last. Okay. So I've been secretly, I go to the website all the time of Mustache Yarn. I love self-striping yarn, and they are so lovely at Mustache Yarn. Ha, ha. This is the Vespa colorway in their perfect self-striping sock, which is, it's two must match skeins. So you wind it, there's two skeins on here, like wound, you know, twisted together, but they're separate. And so I'll put them both on my Swift and then wind one and then the other. And if you do it the right way and they give directions, then you can knit matching socks. So these are 75/25 merino nylon, fingering weight, obviously, 460 yards in 100 grams. This is the Vespa colorway, and I love it. So I got myself, and then I found a whole bunch of other self-striping dyers. So I have some coming, but you know, I'm knitting it all. Okay. So I'll knit a pair of socks out of this for myself. I think I'm going to do a vanilla sock with an afterthought heel, because I think self-striping yarn looks amazing in just a plain old vanilla sock. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this. And that is all my acquisitions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the episode today. Thank you so much again to Mari, for talking with us, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Feel free to share thoughts, nice thoughts, comment. If you liked the video and episode today, you can give me a thumbs up, like down there, or you can hit the subscribe button down there or there. I don't know which way it is on your thing. I can't remember. And you'll get notified when I do episodes in the future. So I do regular weekly episodes every weekend. I usually release them in the middle of the night between Sunday and Monday Central Daylight Time, which is like middle of the night, which is like GMT -5. So usually it'll be like 2 or 3 a.m. that I will upload it. Yeah. So I also do midweek minis. I did my first one this week, and I have lots of ideas to record, and I will be randomly releasing those. So if you subscribe, you will get notified when I put one of those out. So thank you so much for sticking around and joining. It's great. I'm having fun, and I hope you're all enjoying it as well. And thanks for being open to hearing about important stuff. And yeah, this won't be a podcast where we stick to the knitting. It's not gonna happen. So I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye.